Shalom, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. My name is Ishaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation will be covering two different aspects. One, dealing with the matter that somebody made an attack upon the scriptures. Secondly, addressing the idea of saying that the scriptures come from the white man, aka the European, in this particular case, the Greeks in particular. And so this is not going to be a long presentation. However, it's going to be a necessary one for edification purposes. All right. Didn't want to jump the gun there, but let's go on. All right. The means we will be discussing today. On the left hand, we see the following. In case you didn't know, the Bible's 10th commandments are merely plagiarized extractions from ancient African (Egypt and Nubia) laws called the 42 Negative Confessions or the 42 Laws of Ma'at. Now, let's understand something, brothers and sisters. A negative confession cannot be equated to being a law. The law of whatever society, whatever culture, would by default have to predate something before it can be called negative or positive. Because the law of a society is what determines what is negative or what is positive, what is to be done and what is not to be done. So when we want to look at the aspect of this meme on the left-hand side that says, what's in quote, laws called the 42 Negative Confessions and or the 42 Laws of Ma'at. But as stated, a law already is in precedence or precedes the aspect of what can be called negative or positive. All right. Now, we're going to go over in this particular presentation what these things are because it's going to be shown a little bit clearer than you see right here. We want to pay attention, brothers and sisters, at the same token to the right side where it says, why is there not one date recorded in the Bible? Then it says, well, maybe it's because in 325 AD, Emperor Constantine and the Council of Nicaea realized that dating these canon (scriptures) would undermine the authenticity of the book of stolen myths, legends, and allegories that they created for some type of political gain or conquest to further their agenda, and the inclusion of the dates would furthermore expose the Bible as a complete fraud filled with nothing more than a bunch of man-made fiction that was loosely based off of an even older book that they had very little understanding of, knowledge about, or information on. Then it says, and this so-called Bible has been used to start wars, enslave, and crucify people ever since. But it was never God's word. The truth shall set you free. It's completely and totally fake. Now, according to that meme right there, they're saying that the Bible is completely and totally fake. So let's go over some things that's not even in the presentation to see if the Bible is completely fake. Let's go, if you will, to the book of Proverbs, chapter 10, verse 4. All right? And let's see if we have any knowledge or understanding or information concerning this kind of matter. It says this: he becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. So when you look at that particular part right there, it says, he becometh poor that dealeth with the slack hand. Can that be said to be true? Can that be said that the slacker, the person who is nonchalant, the person who gives not as much attention or energy towards something, Does it achieve that thing? Case in point, not to be taking a shot at myself with chemistry when I was in college and all of that, it really did not interest me. You understand? So I was okay with the grade that I got in it. You understand? Because I could care less about it. So once it came down to something like linguistics or history, something that interested a brother, that's something I wound up getting higher grades in because I put more energy into it. In layman terms, you can't sit there and fake love on anything, be it a relationship with another person, be it a relationship with yourself. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. I want to go over another particular thing, brothers and sisters, because this right here distinctly says in quotes, it's completely and totally fake. All right. So let's look, brothers and sisters, if we will. Thank you for that. Let's go, if we will, to Proverbs chapter 30, verse 11. So we could begin to see what's going on in this particular aspect. We are in the scriptures, the book of Proverbs, chapter 30, verse 11. And it says the following. There is a generation that curseth their father and doth not bless their mother. Is that totally fake? Are there not generations of people today who even do such, that don't bless their mother and curse their father? My father ain't bleep. My mother blop blop, so forth and so on. You understand? So this right here just goes to show you just two things out of the wisdom part of the Bible that it shows itself to be of a true aspect. So when somebody says that it's what? Totally, pardon me, completely and totally fake, you got to explain the fact that you have real things that's coming out of a book that is said, according to this meme here, that is completely and totally fake. All right, so let's go on to the next part. Let us examine this. Now, we're taking it back to the meme that we looked at previously, but on the left-hand side of such, expanded. One more time, it says, in case you didn't know, the Bible's 10th commandments are merely plagiarized extractions from the ancient African, parentheses, Egypt and Nubia laws, called the 42 negative confessions and or the 42 laws of Ma'at. So let's look at the list here that they say the 42 negative confessions or the 42 laws of Ma'at. Let's go on. It says, I will not do wrong, I will not steal. I will not act with violence, I will not kill. I will not be unjust. I will not cause pain. I will not waste food. I will not lie. I will not desecrate holy places. I will not speak evil. I will not abuse my sexuality. I will not cause the shedding of tears. I will not sow seeds of regret. I will not be an aggressor. I will not act guileful. I will not lay waste to the plowed land. I will not bear false witness. I will not speak against any person. I will not be wrathful or angry. I will not lay with a man's wife. I will not lay with a woman's husband. I will not pollute myself. I will not cause terror. I will not pollute the earth. I will not speak in anger. I will not turn from the words of truth. I will not utter curses. I will not initiate a quarrel. I will not be excitable or contentious. I will not be prejudiced. I will not be an eavesdropper. I will not speak overmuch. I will not act against my ancestors. I will not waste water. I will not do evil. I will not be arrogant. I will not blaspheme the one most high. Let's stop at that one. What does number 37 say? I will not blaspheme the one most high. Let's go on. I will not cause fraud. I will not defraud temple offerings. I will not plunder the dead. I will not mistreat children. I will not mistreat animals. Now, what I'm going to ask right there is in no way intended as a shot against many in the Kemetic community, But in that community, they praised the guy, all right, that found Horemhab's tomb. They praised the guy that found Ramses' tomb. But right there, it distinctly says the number 40, I will not plunder the dead. So in order for these Egyptologists to even be able to go into something in Egypt, in order to sit there and extract something of the pharaohs, that means that one had to sit there and plunder the dead for such. So all these people who are praising these kind of memes, and all these people who are some of the same people who are sitting up there giving thanks to their quote great right father for plundering the dead Egyptians, are they sitting up there saying you should have never did that in the first place? Or are these same people, many in the comedic aspect, are trying to ask us Israelites, where are our dead? You understand? That's like somebody, like I lost both my mother and my father, may they rest in peace. I will feel highly offended if somebody were to go and say they want to dig up the grave of Miss or Mr. I wasn't going to mention their names just so online, but it would sit there and bother me if somebody wanted to do that. You understand? For those who may have lost their child, I'm sure it would bother if somebody wanted to go and sit there and dig up that grave. I remember one sister, and it's not to expose the gender for any particular purpose. She was, in layman terms, ex-Israelite turned Kemetic. And so I remember asking her, I said, would you be okay if somebody were to dig up your dead? Don't you know she being so engulfed in her own misunderstanding sat there and said, okay. So if somebody were to dig up your great grandparents, you would sit there and be all right with that. Even in today's society, they try to sit there and tell the people, do not offer your organs when you're sitting up there driving or when you're going to sit up there and get your driving license. These people are demonic who want to sit there and have your organs for sale. They used to do that to black people, brothers and sisters, when they used to lynch us. When you go into a book called 100 Years of Lynchings, they used to sit there and take the black man's stomach out. They used to sit there and castrate the black man, as you even saw in the movie Rosewood, where they took the black man and cut his ear off. They used to sit there and sell your gallbladder, your spleen, your heart, and all these different things. All you got to do is go into the book called 100 Years of Lynchings by Ralph Ginsburg, and it talks about those kind of things. So when you're looking at the aspect of the New Age Kemetic Society, Illuminati orientated foundation that wants to come and ask us Bible believers, us mainly Old Testament Bible believers, well, where's your dad at? Where's the prophet Ezekiel and where the prophet Jeremiah at? We don't follow the aspect of digging up the grave, because not to be funny, many of us in America don't even know where we're going to be buried. Here's the point in me mentioning that. People, and I love history, but you do not want to be so engulfed in loving history to where you have no idea what's going to happen 20, 30 years later, 40, 50 years later, 60, 70 years later. The Bible tells you a wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. But what has happened, instead of teaching, and I'm not the one to teach the economics, but instead of those who have the ability shining, they seem maybe to be overshadowed by all of this debate stuff that seemed to be going on. So now you have 5 years and fake awards being given out. You have 10 years and people still on some DVD debate beef stuff like this, the rap game and so forth and so on. Brothers and sisters, as many people have stated, quote, the conscious community has been infiltrated by the Illuminati, hands down. That has happened. And so now we want to explain later on that the scriptures, the Bible, is not the white man's book. It's not the white man's scriptures. The first country mentioned in the Bible is Ethiopia. I mean, hands down, Ethiopia is in the heart of Africa. So I don't know how anybody can sit there and say that. It's the first, it's Ethiopia. It's not England. See, if you were to read a book that talked about, let's say, like the Diary of Anne Frank, that talked about maybe like Holland and Poland and Germany, then yeah, you could say that's a white person's book. But if you have a book like the scriptures that starts off talking about Ethiopia, starts off talking about ancient Sumer, aka Shinar, it starts off talking about the aspect of Egypt as well, starts off talking about ancient Canaan. All of those are African nations and African peoples, beside the Sumerians, which would be part of your Western Asian peoples. But the ancient Sumerians had a terminology for the ancient people of Ethiopia named Magan. You can go into a book and I'm going to cite the book inside the description when this is loaded up. All right. But the author of that book is a guy named Kramer, Kramer. All right. So now, brothers and sisters, addressing this particular matter, when you're looking at it, number 37 distinctly says, end quote, I will not blaspheme the one most high. Now, if this is supposed to be from ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia, according to the description of it on the left-hand side of it, I wanted to ask, what language is it Metuneta? Is it Ge'ez? Is it Amharic? Or so forth and so on? What language is number 37 written in, or how is it to be said in that language when it says, I will not blaspheme the one most high? How do you translate that inside of the ancient African, Egyptian, or Nubian language? Let me know, because I don't know how to say it and such. So maybe somebody can enlighten me on that. All right. So now it says in this right here, I will not do wrong. I will not steal. I will not act with violence. Now, of course, we know that the scripture says more, all right, than 10 commandments. But this right here is saying the Bible's 10th commandment. So let's go on to the next slide. The matter discussed. The Bible's 10th commandment. The 10th commandment is, speaking of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet. Plagiarize. Who did the plagiarism? Plagiarism is defined as the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Now, brothers and sisters, if the Most High is the Most High of the Israelites, if the Most High, according to this meme, it says in number 37, I will not blaspheme the one Most High, would not the same Most High God be the same one over the Israelites as well as over the entire world, over the entire earth? Because you can't be higher than what is the Most High, because the Most High is the highest. So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. And if such is the case, then according to the meme, or maybe I missed it, who gave these laws to, as it says there, from ancient African, Egypt, and Nubian laws? Who gave it to the ancient Africans and the ancient Nubians? Did a god of either the Egyptians or a god of the ancient Nubians give them these laws? Because according to the Bible, where they said this is plagiarized from, the Bible says what? That the God of the Israelites gave them these laws, statutes, commandments, and judgments. So that's a question I want to ask. Who is responsible for giving the laws to the ancient Egyptians? Because if you want to say it is the aspect of Ma'at is younger, brothers and sisters, than the grand god of the ancient Egyptians, which was Re. Some say as Ra. You understand? So if you're looking at it in that particular case, in that particular aspect, are we to say then that an Egyptian goddess, Ma'at, who is the wife of her husband, Ma'e, because you got to remember, Ma'at had a counterpart inside of Egyptian culture. All right. So looking at it in that particular case and looking at it that particular aspect, how do you have a goddess younger than the man god of the ancient Egyptians as the lawgiver? Would not the main god be the one to give that? Would not Ma'at be the one to say that she got it from, or it was influenced or given by Re? Brothers and sisters, the meme is a fallacy. Somebody did not go into the culture of the ancient Egyptians and look into the history between the ancient Egyptians and the Nubians and or the culture of the ancient Nubians before they made this. You understand? Because when you look at what is referred to as the 10 Commandments, there are certain things in what they call the principles of Ma'at, some call it that, the 42 negative confessions. There's certain things in even the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20 that's not even in that. Next slide. The Egyptians and the Nubians, ancient African, Egypt and Nubia, question mark. Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side is a map. You see there Egypt, Lower Nubia, Upper Nubia, Sudan. So now if you're looking right there, brothers and sisters, hopefully the people can see where my arrow is, all right? If you're looking right there, where it says Lower Nubia, by where it says between the first and the second cataract. Brothers and sisters, Meroe and Khartoum in the Sudan was all operated, brothers and sisters, by the people that we understand in history as the Kushites. This becomes important when you get into the history of the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Ethiopians. Now, let's read. Did Egypt and Nubia get along? The ancient Egyptians did not always get along with the Nubians. The 4th dynasty, the 12th and 18th dynasties are examples of when Egyptians raided the Nubians. It should be noted the Nubians were also known as the Kushites. In Dynasty 25, the Kushites, aka the Nubians, were ruling in Egypt. This is when you get about Pianki, Alara, Kashta. This is when you get into the aspect of Shabaka. This is when you get to the aspect of Tahaka. So when you go into the history of something, mind you, Tahaka is mentioned in the Bible. Okay, so the meme that we were talking about before too, that said it's completely inaccurate. It is a false and it's not real. So let's go and see in the same Bible. Let's go and see 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 9. So we can gain something for edification purposes. 2 Kings chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 9. And it says this. And when he had heard say of Taharka, king of Ethiopia, stop. He heard say of Taharka, king of Ethiopia, behold, he is come out to fight against thee. He sent messages again unto Hezekiah, saying, all right, you got to understand what's going on in 2 Kings 19. That leads you to understand what's going on in Isaiah chapter 19. When many people in the Kemetic community try to say, well, in the Bible, it says, Egypt, my people. No, what it's talking about in Isaiah chapter 25, verse 19, pardon me, is not Isaiah 19. It's not Isaiah chapter 19, verse 25. All right. What that is talking about right there is talking about the ancient nations of the Egyptians, the ancient nations of the Israelites, the ancient nations of the Assyrians having peace. That's what it's talking about right there in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 25. Now, taking it back, brothers and sisters, if you will, to what we just read in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 9, it talks about Taharka. Taharka was one of the kings that was ruling. The Bible correctly states it as Ethiopia, but we already know good and well that the Ethiopians in Dynasty 25 was ruling in Egypt. So this is something we want to point out. Now, when you look, brothers and sisters, in your own time, and you look at the 4th dynasty, the 12th dynasty, and the 18th dynasty, what happened in Dynasty 12 is when you get into the aspect of what happened with Senusret. All right. When you get into Dynasty 18, you read about Thutmose I as well as Thutmose III that did raids against the Ethiopians, aka the Nubians. So when you go in your own time, you could begin to see that King Tutankhamun or King Tut had his own plaque made offending the ancient Ethiopians by having dogs attack them, like the white man had dogs attacking black people. Another subject. But the point we want to assist is we want to sit there and get into concerning this kind of matter is that the ancient Nubians and the ancient Egyptians were not on some pro-black, we're going to be on some Colin Kaepernick stuff and all together. No, it wasn't like that. They didn't see themselves as united black front. They saw themselves, we are the Kushites, you are the people of Semitawi, therefore we may not always be getting along. And so therefore sometimes they were at peace and sometimes they were not at peace. So we want to emphasize showing that the Illuminati has infiltrated, quote, the conscious community. We have been then seeing the Egyptians being sown as all black people on the earth, and therefore everybody else that's not basically of ancient Kemet must therefore be by default white. So when the Ethiopians attacked, we're going to say they were Egyptians too. When the Hyksos attacked, we're going to say that was the white man. No. That just goes to show you that somebody didn't understand that the ancient people of ancient Egypt knew that they were not all united under a black melanated banner. That's something we want to point out in that particular regard. Next slide. The matter of Kamos and Neferhotep III. Kamos, who ruled in Dynasty 17, which was concurrent with Dynasty 14, 15, and 16, I meant to type, stated the following. Why do I contemplate my strength while there is one great man in Avaris and another in Cush, sitting united with an Asiatic and a Nubian, while each man possesses his slice of Egypt? Now, Dynasty 17 is part of what they refer to as the intermediate period or the second intermediate period of ancient Egypt. What am I pointing out in that particular regard, brothers and sisters, is this. All right? The Hyksos that were ruling in ancient Egypt did not call themselves even the Hyksos. That's something we may want to look into. Did the Hyksos themselves leave any records? Or are we just to go by what Hatshepsut said of the Asiatics? Are we just to go by what Manetho, all right, is said to have said about the ancient Asiatics? You understand? Or can we go and see any records that these Asiatics that were called barbarians by Epira the papyrus, or in his papyrus, can we go and see what is being stated by that? Can we see these quote barbarian writings or statements of their own selves? Or are we just to take, as Napoleon stated, the killers are allowed to sit there and tell the story? All right, so let's go on to the other side. Neferhotep III, who ruled in Dynasty 16, said this of him. According to Neferhotep III, Thebes during that time was the worst of a food shortage. He tried to defend the city when the, quote, advancing Hyksos were coming. So in Dynasty 16, brothers and sisters, Neferhotep spoke about this particular aspect. Now, some people do state that Neferhotep III ruled in Dynasty 14. Some say Dynasty 16. And so this gets us back to the chronology matter about the ancient Egyptians, which we're going to address as we go along this particular thing. What am I pointing out in this particular slide is this. The ancient Egyptians, one being Kamose of Dynasty 17, another named Neferhotep of Dynasty 16, some say 14, they are showing that they were not all united with everybody on earth. Ancient Egypt was not always about, we have an open door policy. We want to sit there and welcome everybody in. No, they built forts, brothers and sisters, to sit there and keep out the Libu, aka the Libyans. They built forts, brothers and sisters, to keep out the advancing Hyksos, as we can sit there and see right there. So these are certain things that we just want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. King Pai, Pianki, went against Tefnach. The cities of Memphis, Heliopolis, and others were taken over by the Nubians in what later became the matter of Dynasty 25. When Red Amun of Dynasty 23 became weak, it gave the Ethiopians / the Nubians the chance to get into and rule Egypt. Now, brothers and sisters, now we want to point out for edification purposes, all right, that Memphis, Heliopolis is north of the land that we today refer to in Egypt as Thebes. Thebes in the Bible, all right, was called the land of No. All right, so Thebes is the Greek terminology for such a place. So when we're looking at this particular aspect, the victory still of King Paye, brothers and sisters, we have to know good and well to understand that they actually made a record of defeating other nations who just happened to be black. You may want to look this up in history. Let's go on to the next slide. The matter of the 42 negative confession. I have not committed sin. I have not committed robbery with violence. I have not stolen. I have not slain man or woman. I have not stolen food. Then it goes on and on and on. I want to pay attention to number 24 that says, I have not disobeyed the law. What law is that talking about? See, because if you're going to use these kind of things, such as the aspect of the Ma'at aspect to go against the Bible, when it speaks of laws, it tells you what it's talking about. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. We are in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, all right? And we're going to start, brothers and sisters, 58. Deuteronomy 28, verse 58. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God. So right here, it tells you the words of this law that are written in this book. So the law, according to the Bible, is what? Let's go, brothers and sisters, to Psalms 119, verse 142, so we can gain understanding of what we're talking about for edification purposes. We are in Psalms 119, and we're going to read verse 142, and it says the following. All right? Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. So, according to the Bible, the law within the Bible is the truth. And it also says, brothers and sisters, that in the book of Deuteronomy 28, what the law is. It says this law that are written in this book. So you won't have to go to another book to find out what the law of the Most High is, because it's already in the Torah itself. So this is something we want to point out. So when we're looking at what is referred to as the 42 negative confessions, number 24 says, I have not disobeyed the law. What law is that talking about? Because the Bible doesn't leave one with a question mark wondering what law is that. See, you a sloppy scholar when you want to sit there and try to take the aspect of the principles of Ma'at and try to use that against the Bible. You a sloppy scholar when you try to take the Code of Hammurabi and try to use it against the Bible. Because the Code of Hammurabi, brothers and sisters, speaks of death or capital punishment for those who harbor a runaway slave. So let's go and see, because there are some brothers and sisters who try to actually sit there and take, end quote, what? The Code of Hammurabi was said to be the precursor or before the aspect of Moses getting the laws. So let's see about the laws of Moses and what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 15, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. And it says this. Deuteronomy 23, 15. Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. So much for the Bible being from the white man, because this right here says what about the runaway slave? He shall dwell with thee, even among you, in the place which he shall choose in one of your gates, where it liketh him best, thou shalt not oppress him. The runaway slave in the laws of Deuteronomy 23, it says you're not supposed to return him. The Code of Hammurabi, on the other hand, is saying it's a capital punishment or a death penalty to those who harbor a runaway slave. Now, in the laws of the Most High, so that way we won't be misunderstood about what laws are we talking about. I'm talking about the laws, statutes, commandments in the Torah. It tells you that you are supposed to harbor a runaway slave. It says where it liketh him best. He gets to choose where he wants to be at. So if the white man's law, when you start talking about the aspect of Dred Scott and so forth and so on, and the Judge Taney in the Supreme Court in the 1850s said, we ain't got to respect nothing of a nigga. So how is the Bible from the white man when the laws of the Bible conflict with the white man's society? Come on, somebody ain't thinking. Somebody wasn't thinking when they tried to attack the Israelites in the records left in the scriptures. You should have done better. You should have asked your Jewish overseers who dislike the fact that people such as myself and others are saying that Deuteronomy 28, verse 68 is talking about us. So therefore, they set up this thing, and this is why you don't find the conscious, quote unquote, conscious community attacking the Jewish man. You don't find them talking about the Khazarian aspect. You don't find them sitting up there exposing the aspect of the Dora Europas being black people. You don't find them talking about the aspect of the obelisk of Yehu speaking about him having cornrows. No, they don't get into that particular thing. What they do is they want to attack Israelites by saying, oh, can you find me any Hebrew writings before the time of Herod? That shows you where the mind is at. Herod was of the Idumean / Edomite people. Herod was the friend of Julius Caesar, and then later on, brothers and sisters, he was the friend with Augustus. Augustus was the first Roman emperor. The first emperor of Rome was Augustus. Herod was his buddy. So when you find people in the conscious community now that are trying to sit there and time everything with the nonsense timeline that dates only to the timing of Herod, who was friends with, in layman term, the white man, and then asking us, where's our evidence of such according to the white man's schedule? No. Somebody didn't think carefully about history. This is what I was talking about when I first came on this particular subject. You should have gotten your studies on together first before you start asking questions. You can't ask nonsense questions. And of course, the statement goes by saying there's no such thing as a dumb question. There is in a conscious community, because their questions is not based upon trying to gain knowledge. Their questions is based for debate purposes. So as you give your answer, they're not listening to gain understanding of what you're talking about. They're listening to try to quote unquote combat you again. This is something we want to go over for edification purposes. So when the Israelites begin to stop debating, you'll be finding them debating among themselves. When the Israelites are keep on saying, we want to leave this land here, let's go over there, you will find perhaps, and it is true, you find the autonomous, we're indigenous to North America, the slave trade never happened, that community debating with the Pan-Africanists. House of Israel, we got to do what we do. Those who want to sit there and just keep with the debating, as if this is some Trump and Kavanaugh thing with the who got what and whose emails and whose tax scam and who is doing fake, what is that thing called? Credit repair, all of that stuff, and everybody being exposed for being a scam artist. Let them be exposed, because remember, they said the hell with the Bible. The Bible that says you're supposed to return back your pledge. Israelites, we need not sit there and waste so much time with somebody who told to sit there and shoot the Bible. Conscious community, brothers and sisters, you thought it was funny when that guy polite shot up the Bible, didn't you? But then y'all the same ones, he scammed me. I sent the money for my books and I didn't get my books. You should have thought about that when he was at the shooting range shooting the Bible. The book that says return back that which you stolen. You should have thought about that. Then you wouldn't be laughing it. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes. These are the things that they sit there and stand on, sitting up there, not even listening or taking heed to the good aspects of it. Like number 16 here, I am not deceitful. How many have been exposed for fraud? I have not committed sin, number one. Got to ask, what is sin? I have not committed robbery with violence. Yes, many of them have. You're setting up fake things, knowing good and well while you're trying to pimp the ancient Egyptian culture, trying to, one more time, pimp the ancient Egyptian culture, knowing good and well that you had no intention to sit there and build nothing for the children. You are a scam artist. You are a fraud. You understand? You take the people's money, but then you don't sit there and provide the services. And then you stand up there on it talking about, well, if you would have given me more money, I would have been willing to open up my books to show you. But our people love to have it so, like it says in the scriptures in Jeremiah. We like that love song that it speaks of in Ezekiel 33. Prophesy delusions. Give me something that sounds nice. Don't give me the raw truth. Give me something to satisfy my spirit. That speaks about that in Isaiah chapter 30. So you got Isaiah 30 and Ezekiel 33, both speaking about the aspect of people just wanting something that sounds nice, that sounds good to the ear. And it looks good. You know, everybody in Egypt, you know, is a pharaoh. Everybody's a queen, you know, nobody's the peasant. I don't know who that people are that's on the floor shown in the era of the 4th dynasty of Egypt with flies on them with the honey, but I am Pharaoh such and such. Nobody knows who the people are in the Tomb of Horem had with their hand out talking about, can you feed me? They don't know who that is. Nobody is the sister that's shown inside the walls of Ramses IV being clad, dressed half naked. No, everybody is Hatshepsut. Everybody is Nefertiti. Everybody is Ramses. No, brothers and sisters, they have sold you a fallacy. Everybody is not of the royalty aspect. In case you want to know, yes, you can be royal in your own right. Yes, we can say we are kings, we are queens, we are peasants as well. There's nothing wrong with that. You can be that at the same token, because somebody has to clean the floor. Somebody has to do the mopping. You understand? And so now with everybody trying to be, I'm just the royalty, I'm nothing else besides that. You see what the results have come down to. Filth is laid all over the floor because nobody wants to be the cleaner. Let's go on to the next slide. 42 negative confessions continue. I have not worked evil. I have not used evil thoughts, words, or deeds. I have not polluted the water. I have not spoken angrily or arrogantly. Then it goes on to say, in part 40, I have not taken food from a child. Brothers and sisters, the pharaohs, or sometimes referred to as the nice soup, did not follow all of those kinds of things, brothers and sisters. And this is why you find in Dynasty 20 and Dynasty 21, when the average ancient Egyptian person was protesting against what was going on. This is why you find an aspect where you had Thutmose the first emptying out all that he could of the pyramids of the pharaohs and putting them in what they call the Valley of the Kings, because the people was to sit there and grave rob and take the gold from the pharaohs that were dead, so they can sit there and buy food. That was going on inside of the economy of the ancient Egyptians. When you go from Dynasty 18, 19, 20, and 21. This is why by the time you get to Dynasty 22, you had the Libyans that was able to rule easily because there was already a broken down economy from the previous dynasties. You got to understand why these things happen. Why does one dynasty fall, one kingdom fall? Why does one people able to take over another? You got to understand the politics and the economy of a society in that day and time. I go so far as to say, brothers and sisters, this. Everybody talks about it. The mafia in America made it big when what? Prohibition came in. When what they had, the Great Depression, the mafia in America was doing good selling liquor. Because of a political and economic situation, another group of people was able to sit there and thrive on that. So now, when you get into the aspect of Dynasty 20 and Dynasty 21 of ancient Egypt, don't wonder why Dynasty 22 had the ancient Libyans in there as rulers, because the people were so poor in Dynasty 20 and 21 to where they was robbing the tombs. Read about the aspect of a guy to Beckham South, so you can gain an understanding of what's going on. That was a person that was dealing with the aspect of tomb raiding in ancient Egypt. These are things that, do they try to bring them out? Maybe, maybe not. But when everybody is posted, I'm Queen Hatshepsut. I'm Queen Nefertari. I'm Ramses the Great. And look, I sat there and can show you the dead, but you can't show me the dead body of Aaron in the Bible, and I wouldn't want to anyway. You understand? The one case you read of in the Bible of necromancing, the prophet Samuel in the Hebrew says, Lama rigas tani. Why did you disquiet me? Tomorrow, Saul, you and your sons will be with me. That's it. It's done. We don't deal with necromancy. We don't deal with calling up and conjuring spirits. We don't deal with that kind of stuff in the house of Israel. We don't deal with tomb raiding. One of the things that the Bible speaks of in the book of Amos, it says distinctly what? Because the king of Moab dug up the bones of the king of Edom. That was one of the crimes that was charged against the kings of the Moabites. It was a curse thing. It was a form of disrespect to dig up somebody's grave. Tomb raiding is a game that America supports when you deal with the video game world. Tomb raiding is what the conscious community supports. You know good and well these video games are supported by who? The society that be, the Valid Society, the Illuminati, and then they want to come and ask those who are quote unquote Bible thumpers, well, where's your dead at? I dug up mine, where's yours? That's your problem. If you didn't even want to respect the ancient Egyptian culture to not do tomb raiding. Next slide. Let us look at this carefully. In case you didn't know, the Bible's 10th commandments are merely plagiarized extractions from the ancient Egyptian, from ancient African Egypt and Nubia. Next slide. Final thoughts on the subject. The Papyrus Ani is said to be dated from the time of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. Even if we take the later Christian rendition that Seti and Ramses were the pharaohs of the oppression in Exodus, the Papyrus Ani is still after the Exodus recorded in the Bible. One of the claims that many in the Kemetic community say is that Hebrews did not write before going to Egypt. If we are to take that logic, then we can say that if the Papyrus Ani is dated to the 19th dynasty, then most Egyptians did not know of the confessions themselves. Drops mic. Let me explain what I'm talking about. One of the claims that's made against us as Israelites is that, well, when you go into the aspect, brothers and sisters, the ancient Israelites, the ancient Hebrews were never recorded as writing until after they left the land of Egypt. So therefore, they have no writings, they had no culture, they had nothing until they came to the Egyptians. Brothers and sisters, the other claim that is made is Abraham in the Bible was lying when he went to Africa. He brought a lie to Africa, saying that was his sister and not his wife. Here's my response to that. If I come to your land as a visitor and I'm telling you this female that's with me here is my sister, does it make it right or decent for you to take her to the back room and quote, hit that? Pardon me, sleep with her carnally? So let me understand this. You're saying that Abraham was wrong for not saying that Sarah was his wife when he went to the land of Egypt, which they interrupt by saying Africa because they flip flop Egypt and Africa when necessary, except when you get to this part here. See, that's when they don't do it. See, when they start talking about Memphis and Heliopolis and the victory still of Paye, no, that's when Egypt is Egypt and it's to his own self. But any other time, let's flip flop between the two. That's another subject. Now, brothers and sisters, when you look at the aspect of what we're dealing with here, saying that Abraham was a liar, that went into the land of Egypt, I want to state and ask a question again. If I were to go to your home, my brother, and I say the sister that you see right here is my sister, would you take or would your guest be right to take my said sister into the back room and sleep with her, penetrate her, so that way we won't be misunderstood? What do you mean by sleeping? I'm talking about putting and inserting something inside of a vagina from your organ. That's what I'm talking about. So people won't be trying to in other presentations. I don't know what he meant by sleeping with. Play silly if you want to, because you know what I'm talking about. You understand? I'm talking about the act that makes other people come into this earth as a baby. That's what I'm talking about. Is it right if I come to your home? Is it right if I come to your society as a visitor and I say the female that is next to me is my sister? How righteous and decent is it for you to sit there and take her and have sex with her and want her to be your wife? So, of course, in wisdom, I'm going to sit there and state to protect us, that's my sister. And he really wasn't being a liar when you get right down into it, because the sisters of your people, the women of your people are your sister. That's why the Bible is specific about sleeping with your sister, because it distinctly says the daughter of your father or the daughter of your mother. So when I'm talking about the sister I'm courting with, the sister who I'm in love with, that cannot be interchanged with the biological daughter of my mother or my father. That's why Leviticus 18 in the Bible is specific about naming who it names. So, brothers and sisters, when you get into this particular aspect, if you're saying that the Hebrews were not writing until they came up out of the land of Egypt, even if you take the later Christian version dating of the Exodus as being in dynasty 18 and or 19, that means the Papyrus Ani still wasn't written, which means if writing had to be the only way people to know things, that means the ancient Egyptians did not know of the principles of Ma'at itself. Intermission. In the 42 negative confessions, we see nothing regarding idolatry or Sabbath. Sabbath is mentioned in the Ten Commandments. So is the prohibition against idolatry. Let us look at the list given to us in the meme regarding the confessions. I will not do wrong. I will not steal. I will not act with violence. I will not kill. I will not be unjust. I will not cause pain. I will not waste food. I will not lie. I will not desecrate holy places. I will not speak evil. I will not abuse my sexuality. I will not cause the shedding of tears. I will not be in I will not sow seeds of regret. I will not be an aggressor. I will not act guiltful. I will not lay waste the plowed land. I will not be a false witness. I will not speak against any person. I will not be wrathful and angry. I will not lay with a man's wife. I will not lay with the woman's husband. I will not pollute myself. I will not cause terror. I will not pollute the earth. I will not speak in anger. I will not turn from the words of truth. I will not utter curses. I will not initiate a quarrel. I will not be excitable or contentious. I will not be prejudiced. I will not be an eavesdropper. I will not speak over much. I will not act against my ancestors. I will not waste water. I will not do evil. I will not be arrogant. I will not blaspheme the one most high. I already asked, how do you say that inside the language of this original document? I will not commit fraud. I will not defraud temple offerings. I will not plunder the dead. I will not mistreat children. I will not mistreat animals. Somebody should have thought carefully, because see, the ancient Nubian culture and ancient Egyptian culture was not the same. The ancient culture of the Nubians, in part being the Cushites, they didn't have a problem doing war. They didn't have a problem causing pain. Correct me if I'm wrong, ancient Kush did not have a law that was up there, sitting up there talking about, well, you know what? I will not cause terror. I will not pollute the earth. I will not speak in anger. I will not turn from the words of truth. What is truth? Truth is broad. What can be true, for instance, of a man is not true of instance for a woman. Your laws are not laws, they're ideas. Many of them not being spiteful or hateful, or you just want to bash ancient Egypt. No. Many of them are actually good things to live by. But you know what is understood as good is already a litmus that's already set. As far as being of the house of Yisrael, that litmus is the Torah and wisdom. So you already know good and well, brothers and sisters. You already know good and well, brothers and sisters, that you already can see that there are certain things that's good in there. You should not steal. You should not do wrong. All right? But we want to talk about some of them other ones as we go along, like the one that says not cause pain or not act with violence. Next slide. A date matter. Why is there not one date recorded in the Bible? Now, this is the other meaning we want to go over in this here. We're going to read what it says, all right, on the left-hand side. The meme mentions Constantine in 325 AD. The Septuagint is dated to 285 BCE, which is, brothers and sisters, centuries before the era of Constantine. The Codex Sinaiticus is dated to 330 to 360 AD. The Dead Sea Scrolls is dated between 150 BCE and 70 AD. All right, the Dead Sea Scrolls contain in full volume the book of Isaiah. The Codex Sinaiticus, I am an Old Testament based brother. However, the Codex Sinaiticus is mainly predominantly about the New Testament writings. The Septuagint doesn't have anything about the New Testament. See, maybe whoever created this should have been aware of the aspect of what is only contained in the Old Testament and what only contains majority of the New Testament. Because one of the things that those who try to bash against Israelites try to sit there and say and point out as a quote unquote point, not to be spiteful, by saying quote unquote point is Well, the Codex Sinaiticus is the oldest Bible. No, it is not. Stop. It's not. Secondly, when they try to say, well, Deuteronomy 28, it's not even in there. The book of Deuteronomy, for a great extent, is not in the Codex Sinaiticus. Just as much, brothers and sisters, as what is called Revelation in the New Testament is not in the Septuagint. This is why, if you want to talk about dating, it's very important to understand what's being spoken of. Why is there not one date in the Bible? Let's look. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, I want to mention this. The Septuagint, brothers and sisters, when you go into the book of Josephus, it gets into the aspect of how the Septuagint came about and why. The Septuagint was written in Greek, translated from the writing of Aramaic, but the language of Hebrew. What am I saying? The Hebrew script that you see today, brothers and sisters, is Aramaic writing. That is to say, the writing of the ancient Aramean people. Remember, the mothers of the Israelites, Bilhah, Zilpah, and the other two, Bilhah, Zilpah, Rachel, and Leah, were Aramean women. So the language matters coming from their mommy side, their maternal side, if you will, you understand, would have an impact. I remember having to discuss this with somebody in the debate realm when they was trying to say that, well, Ezra and Daniel in the Bible was written in Aramaic and so forth. That means it was written in it. Ezra and Daniel were already grown men by the time their books were already written. So for me to write something means that I already am familiar with the language. I can't write in Russian because I don't know Russian. I don't know Greek, so I cannot write Greek. I do not know Cantonese or Mandarin, so Yeshaya cannot write that. So in order for me to be able to write something, I already have to have knowledge of it. So Ezra and Daniel being written mainly in Aramaic doesn't change anything about the authenticity of the scriptures. It just means they knew that language. But when you deal, and it's not to be disrespectful, but when you deal in many cases with unilateral people, that is to say, and those who love to only be such, those who only know one language. Unilateral, they only mainly know only English. They don't know no other language. It is difficult to try to explain the matters of linguistics when you don't understand another language. No disrespect intended. As a brother who does know and speak Hebrew, it is easier for me to explain Hebrew to a so-called Dominican and Puerto Rican and a so-called Haitian because one already knows Spanish, one already knows French. Because so you already familiar with more than just the English or more than just one language. But when you're trying to explain linguistics matters to a person who doesn't realize that in order for Daniel and in order for Ezra to write in Aramaic or their books to be written in Aramaic, because it was called the lingua franca of their time. Lingua franca means the predominant language of a particular society or a particular area. Look these terminologies up. Get out of the meme scholarship, brothers and sisters, and others included. This is something we want to point out and emphasize for edification purposes. The Septuagint was written in Greek, but it was translated. When you get into the book of Josephus, he explains that it was translated from the actual Aramaic, which sounds similar to the Hebrew. That's what the book of Josephus says. I can make the citation in the description when this video is loaded up. So Aramaic and Hebrew sound alike according to Josephus. So once you begin to see one, you can begin to see its cousin. Just as much as you begin to see certain similarities between either certain African dialects or languages, as well as the same thing with European languages or dialects. All right? The Dead Sea Scrolls predate the timing of the Old and New Testament coming together, as does the Septuagint. By the time you get to the era of Constantine, brothers and sisters, there is already pinned what we understood as the New Testament. So when you go now, when you look at the Codex Sinaiticus, that is predominantly about the New Testament era, which, not to be disrespectful or offensive to our brothers who are Messianic, that was the Christian era. So of course they're going to sit there and have the majority being that, just like you could find certain people who predominantly always cite the New Testament more than the Old Testament because that's where your spirit, for whatever reason, leads you into. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. The word. It was never God's word. Which God is the meme referring to? What is the word of God then, so a contrast can be shown? Is there a set word of God? See, according to this meme that you see here on the right-hand side, it says, but it was never God's word. So in order for this book there to be said to not be God's word, you would have to understand what God is the meme talking about, and does this God have a set word? See, without answering what God the meme is talking about, you can't answer what word would be according to that God. Meme scholarship is sloppy. Next slide. It's fake. It's completely and totally fake. It was used to start wars. Definition of war: a state of armed conflict between different nations or states, or different groups within a nation or state. Ancient Assyria had wars. There were wars in the Bible. There were wars that occurred that had nothing to do with the Bible. But according to this meme, it says that the Bible was used to start wars. War, synonym: fight, battle, combat, struggle with, slash against, or attack. Next slide. Let's look at the memes presented. Remember, one meme says, end quote, I will not act with violence. I will not kill. I will not be wrathful and angry. So when you look at this meme on the left-hand side, number 3, number 4, number 6, I will not cause pain. And then you got number 19, I will not be wrathful and angry. So we got one saying, I will not cause pain, I will not act with violence, I will not kill, and I will not cause pain. And number 19, one more time, says, I will not be wrathful and angry. In order for war to exist, wrath has to be there. Anger has to be there. See, this is why, for instance, in the movie Rosewood, when the guy was saying, and I'm not knocking prayer, I'm just knocking who you're praying to, but not knocking prayer, but in the movie Rosewood, right, when it was said, let us pray. Preacher, I ain't on the mood for praying right now. That man wanted war. That man wanted to, quote, flip some heads, fly some heads, bring the sword against their enemies. That's what they wanted to do. And when you in the mode for that, not the time for prayer. Sometimes you pray as you go charging. I'm getting to a certain point with this. See, because you got to look, brothers and sisters, the definition of war is a fight, battle, struggle, combat struggle with or against or attack. So now if you're looking at one meme that says, I will not act with violence, I will not kill, I will not cause pain, I will not be wrathful and angry, I will not cause terror. Number 23, I will not speak in anger. You got to be angry to be comfortable to be in war, brothers and sisters. Some way, some form, sometime. I will not initiate a quarrel. Do you see where I'm getting with this kind of aspect? Because see, the meme on the right-hand side says that the Bible was used to start wars. So when you look at the definition of war, I gotta ask the women, not to be sexist, what do you think should happen to somebody who rapes a child? Most women say, when I say, well, just kill the miserable bastard, no, that's not good enough. You need to take his nails out and shove it in his anus and take his eyebrows out and cut his tongue in half and take his penis and then shove it in his anus hole after you shoved his nails in there. That's what women talk about when they start talking about the aspect of how you deal with a person who rapes children. That's anger. Can I disagree with that kind of judgment on a rapist of a child? No. Is my understanding of saying just kill the miserable bastard quite different than saying we're going to cut his eyebrows out and cut part of his tongue out? As a matter of fact, put his scrotum in his mouth and put his anus out and then put his penis in there. That's how women talk when they start talking about how a rapist of a child should be dealt with. That's in anger. That's in wrath. That's causing terror. You understand? That is initiating a quarrel. So what am I getting at in this kind of aspect? Let's go on to the next slide. The Bible starts or speaks of. Let's understand that. The Bible does not start wars. The Bible speaks of wars. As it says in Ecclesiastes, a time of peace and a time for war. It says in those principles of my aunt or the negative confessions of my aunt, I will not act with violence. Brothers and sisters, is a passive document in part. They was giving you the aspect of turn the other cheek. Don't rise up against those who hate you. Love your enemies. Pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you. Don't act with violence. Don't initiate the quarrel. Stay down. Why do you think the Nazis did not like the Old Testament? Because they knew good and well if the Old Testament was the one that was going to be taught and preached to the people and brought out to the people will rise up. That's why before the people was indoctrinated in Christianity, in slavery, they made sure that the Negroes was not reading. This is why Nat Turner was a reader and he was a problem. This is why Gabriel Prosser was a reader and he was a problem. These are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? The Bible is used to start wars, question mark. If we look at the definition of war, even if it is defensive, violence must take place. So if one wants to say, well, I didn't initiate it, I'm just defending. In order to defend against violence, you need violence in order to defend against it. Brothers and sisters, there's nothing wrong with that particular aspect. There is peace after the storm. That's what we want to talk about. There is peace after the storm. You can't sit there and do, and I say this in no offense, like our brothers and sisters and elders in South Carolina with Dylan Roof. The man went in there, shot 9 people and killed them, and our people, indoctrinated, are sitting up there saying, I forgive him, before the man ever sat there and said he apologized. He went in 2015 in South Carolina and murdered 9 people, and the people around there talking about, I forgive you. The family, and I hope I'm not offending nobody, but the people in the family of Yusuf Hawkins, who was killed in 1989, talking about they forgive the guy who murdered their relative. That is insane. I know people who have been murdered, and I happen to know murderers. The murderer knows why the person or people cannot forgive him or her, because women do murder too. You understand? Well, what we'll do at the party is we'll just pat down the men, but we won't search the woman. Then somebody winds up getting shot because homeboy gave the gat, the gun, the burner, the piece, the blazer, if you will, to the sister who wasn't going to be searched, and then she passed the gun off to him. He had beef with somebody at the party. Boom. Once it comes down to that particular aspect, there's not a said murderer on earth who I can understand saying, I don't understand why you can forgive me, unless they already know that the people are already broken down and passive. Napoleon once stated that religion is made so that way the rich can stay in power. Because if you're taught to not have anything, and if you're taught to not react with violence, and if you're taught to just be passive, that is what will cause that to be. You understand? Is this the passive spirit? I will not cause pain. What happens in war? Brothers and sisters, that thing in part is written by a person who's guilty of certain crimes. He or she is going to say for you, I will not act in violence. I will not cause pain. I will not cause the shedding of tears. I will not act with. Stop that. What about being upright? What about apologizing and seeking repentance when you do the wrong? Where's that in your document? Because the Bible talks about repentance. The Bible talks about changing your ways. Why the principles of Ma'at don't have that? Unless you got some other document that I didn't know about. Maybe it's in Nubia, because it wasn't inside of ancient Kemet. Next slide. The idea of the Bible came from whites, Greeks. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13. And if a man lie with mankind as with womankind, both of them have committed abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. Right hand side. That shall not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is abomination. According to the Apocrypha, when the Greeks came, wickedness was multiplied in the earth. Jehoshaphat of Judah was praised for getting rid of the homosexuals in Judah, as was King Josiah, and before him, King Asa. So when you go in the Bible and you read, brothers and sisters, in 1 Kings 14, 1 Kings 15, 1 Kings 22, and 2 Kings 23, you have Jehoshaphat, Asa, and Josiah, who were some of the kings that got rid of the men that were sleeping and having sex with men. All right? The Bible praises those kings for that. It's not one of the things that he sat there and shed the blood of the faggot. No. You get rid of them sodomites because you ain't bringing syphilis over here. Because see, syphilis comes from, in part, with feces inside of one's urethra. You understand? It comes from, in part, dirt. Them UTIs that can sit there and formulate to other kinds of STDs and so forth and so on. UTI means urinary tract infection. Some of that comes from, brothers and sisters, from straight being dirty. Homosexuality promotes dirtiness. You understand? And so this is something we want to talk about in that particular aspect. So let us look at the Greek way for a second. Because according to some people's thoughts, brothers and sisters, the Bible came out of Greece. So if we can sit back and see what the Bible talks about as capital punishment, not an idea. See, there's a difference between a philosopher and a lawgiver. One more time. There's a difference between a philosopher and a lawgiver. So a person who is a philosopher and a person who can sit there and make a law for society is not the same thing. Philosophy doesn't come with capital punishment. Laws could. Laws come with punishments. Laws could come with blessings. Philosophy is just an idea. Comes from the Greek word, which means like the beauty of wisdom. You understand? Laws, on the other hand, have a different kind of aspect. A deeper aspect when you get right down into it. Because laws is how a society is ran. All right? Let's look at the Greek way. Greek, the birth of Western civilization. The symposium was open only to Greek males, and the only women permitted were the heterae, trying to pronounce it right. Pardon me if I mispronounced it. High-class prostitutes trained in music, especially the aulos or flute, dance, gymnastics, and high culture. The activity was primarily enjoyed by the highest class of Greek society. The aristoi. The aristoi, the highest class of Greek society. Everybody knows that Greece is the birthplace of Western civilization. Erastes, sexual act between a man and a boy. Phileter, however that's pronounced, pardon me. Sexual act between a man and a boy. You can look those words up and let's see the Greek culture, because we already read in the Bible where it talks about a male. A male, brothers and sisters, doesn't have a specific age. That male is a specific gender. So a boy is a male and a grown man is a male. Next slide. The Greeks' culture, sorry we had to go there. The Greeks' culture was different. In what Plato says, letter February 13th, Catherine Glass suggests that Phaedrus in the symposium says what Plato thought. This gets Phaedrus and Plato wrong. For Phaedrus, sorry if I mispronounced that homosexual name, is praising pederasty, not homosexual intercourse in general. And Plato condemns homosexual intercourse in both the quote unquote laws and the quote unquote republic. The quote unquote laws recommends that homosexuality, like adultery, fornication, and the use of prostitutes, not be engaged in, and that if it is engaged in, it be kept private or closeted, and that if it is discovered, it be punished by deprivation of civil rights, a severe penalty. In effect, the quote laws recommends criminalization. But you know what the difference between that idea with the Plato thing that he was saying in the public, brothers and sisters, and the laws of the Most High, whether you live in undercover homo, whether you're living straight up out the closet with the nails done and all of that, with your weave in and with your pills that you took to develop females' breasts, mot yamutu in the Hebrew, they shall surely be put to death. The mayhem bomb, their blood shall be upon them. So whether it's in the closet or hidden or out in the open, the Torah is not saying the way it should be done is encloseted, like the way the Greeks is talking about in this particular one. You understand? So, for Phaedrus is praising pederasty. Pederasty, brothers and sisters, is the sexual act that you're seeing on the left-hand side with a grown man and a boy. They preferred to sit there and deal with a boy that did not have a beard. When you study about homosexual acts inside of Greek culture, why do you think the Apocrypha says wickedness was just ran about? Brothers and sisters, for what he's worth, the guy Alex Jones, right? You may have heard of Alex Jones, the one who was said to go into Bohemian Grove and expose what happened in there in the year 2000. In his thing, his documentary about his infiltration into Bohemian Grove, right? He speaks about this happening in July every year, where senators and governors and mayors and judges and all of them come together and they have a great time together. It's only men allowed, and the only time women are in there is when it says it right here. And the symposium was open to Greek males, and the only women permitted were the heteri, high-class prostitutes trained in music, especially the aulos or flute, dancing and gymnastics, and high culture. So, brothers and sisters, when you're dealing with this particular aspect, when it talks about their aspect of what they want to call high culture, this is what they're talking about. The only time it was there, women, you was a prostitute. When I, as the Greek, want to sit there and deal with you, then I'll deal with you. The movie Alexander pointed that out carefully. You understand? Because Alexander was into homosexuality. And I want to emphasize something while we're talking on this. The Bible condemns homosexuality, acts, homosexual acts. Because as we're going to point out, you got a group of people who engage in such acts, but they swear they're not quote unquote gay. And we're going to talk about that as this particular presentation continues and goes on. All right? So let's go on, brothers and sisters, to the next part. Plato and pederasty, the Athenian matter, even from the internet. Pederasty in ancient Greece was a socially acknowledged romantic relationship between an adult male and the Aristes, and a younger male, the Erymenos, usually in his teens. It was characteristic of the archaic and classical periods. See, Plato was a Greek philosopher inside of the aspect of classical Greece. All right? He, in his writings, spoke about homosexuality as being wrong in the open. and that it should be kept in the closet. Let's read that part again. The Symposium says what Plato thought. This gets Phaedrus and Plato wrong, for Phaedrus is praising pederasty, not homosexual intercourse in general, and Plato condemns homosexual intercourse in both the quote-unquote laws and the quote-unquote republic. The laws recommends that homosexuality, like adultery and the use of prostitutes, not be engaged in, and that if it is engaged in, it be kept private or closeted. This is the point I'm talking about. It be kept closeted or private. So if a man is giving oral sex to a man in the closet by themselves, then in Greek culture, you're homo. Whereas in the house of Yisrael, you shall surely be put to death. So therefore, we can begin to see what the Apocrypha is talking about. They wasn't against homosexual acts inside of ancient Egypt. Pardon me, inside of ancient Greece. So anybody who tried to debate Israelites saying, well, you know what, the Bible, it came out of Greece, but the culture, the laws, the capital punishments of each was different. This wasn't you're recommended for criminalization. No, you want to take him, hit you with these stones. Like they do in St. Lucia, like they used to do, to my knowledge, in Jamaica. Like the artist Buju Banton, who in Western society was made to have to apologize for the song that he made called Boom Bye Bye, the Bati Boy. You understand? Because this Western society is sitting up there and condoning that. How dare this artist who is sitting up there getting white man's money, all right, going to sit up there and condemn that kind of act? Because see, what happened with Buju Banton, correct me if I'm wrong, the homosexuals in America at first did not know what the Jamaican terminology that he was talking about, Batiman. It's a fag, it's a homosexual, all right? They don't like, and I'm sorry to have to say it, so I want to explain what I'm talking about. That terminology essentially is saying they don't like the pum pum. That is referred to as the female's vagina. They like the bhakti, which is to say from the back or in the back as well. You understand? So looking at it in that particular case, when you listen to the song, with that understanding now with Buju Banton, when he says look shock in their back, he's talking about putting them to death. In Western society, Buju Banton had to sit there and be made to apologize for making that song. Why? Because he was talking about putting to death what they do in the private and in the open. I want to emphasize this part right there where it says in quotes, what? And that if it is engaging, it be kept private or closeted. The Torah does not talk about taking somebody and being sexually orientated with them of the same gender in the privacy or in the closet. So it's not the same culture. Greek culture did not sit there and talk about slaying them who were engaged in it. It talked about taking away their privileges, not their life. Next slide. Next slide. Zeus and Ganymede. In Greek writings, namely that of Homer, we see that Ganymede was a lover / sexual act person to Zeus. This is one of the cleanest pictures I could find. Now, the other pictures, when I looked it up, it was too grotesque for trying to present something on this kind of channel where decency still has to be promoted. So we can get an idea of what we're talking about, what we're looking at. Zeus is pictured here as a bird carrying Ganymede. That was one of the cleanest. If you care to look up the other pictures, you can go right ahead and see what the Greek culture was promoting. Next slide. Tacitus, who died in 117 AD, matter. Moses wanted to secure for the future his authority over the nations, gave them a novel form of worship, opposed to all that is practiced by other men. Tacitus, Roman historian, the Histories, Book 5. Novel, meaning from the Latin novus, meaning new. So let's read it with that understanding from the Latin. Moses, wishing to secure for the future his authority over the nations, gave them a new form of worship opposed to all that is practiced by other men. So Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, he would have been by default familiar with the Greek culture and with the Roman culture. So the Hebrew culture that Thucydides talks about Moses bringing to the people speaks about slaying, putting to death homosexuals. Roman law doesn't talk about that. Principles of Ma'at does not talk about that. Code of Hammurabi does not talk about that. The Greek quote unquote laws of their quote unquote republic does not talk about what the Torah talks about concerning capital punishment. And praising the leaders in the Bible, such as Josephat, Asa, as well as Josiah, for, in layman terms, killing a faggot. You understand? So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. You're not going to find America being the daughter of Western civilization, Greece being its mother, and America okay with homosexuals, and so forth and so on. I have a job. In my job, the kind of work that I do, and the aspect of dealing with people, security, so forth and so on. When I was working as a teacher inside of a school, as a college teacher for 5 semesters, there's no way that I can sit there and quote unquote say something that's quote unquote making me a bigot in the faggot world. That's what they'll say, oh, you're a bigot. No, homosexuality brings AIDS. Homosexuality brings death. Lesbianism brings breast cancer. Did you know that? Lesbians have a higher chance of developing breast cancer because when a woman has sexual acts the way it's supposed to be with a male, all right, when she releases certain energies, if you will, all right, it releases and relaxes her body. Lesbianism, no offense, not trying to be too graphic, using their tongue, using their fingers, the vaginal canal is not satisfied. It's not made to be dealt with fingers and tongues. There's an organ that the creator already made man with that's made to go into his female counterpart. It's perfectly fit for edification reasoning on purpose, not an accident. You understand? We are creationalists and we are pro-creators. We are not, end quote, evolutionists. Evolution cannot explain why does this match this to go into that to form this later on. But in the quote unquote higher sciences, you understand? Alexander, who was the leader to Ptolemy, who said it was okay for a man and man to be together because that's the highest science. Ptolemy being influenced by Alexander, Alexander being influenced by Aristotle, Aristotle not denouncing anything about Plato. You got one faggot to the next, to the next, to the next in that culture. So now, taking it back to the Bohemian Grove thing. Did you know that AIDS was a problem with them? Did you know that in Bohemian Grove, they do acts of homosexuality? Just like in a higher class in ancient Greece with the Orestes and so forth and so on. So this is how America is what? The daughter of Western civilization. So how can anybody sit there and say that ancient Greece knocked or disrespected or was a bigot in the faggot world? No. There was a so-called conscious sister that I knew. She didn't like the book that I wrote on Deuteronomy 28. I don't know. Maybe she was on the DL. You know. Oh my gosh, you're talking against homosexuality. No, I'm talking about the aspect that 50 Cent, the rapper, said he grew up confused with his mom kissing a girl. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the aspect like that movie Cover that had the guy Bill Duke in it and some other actors and actresses. When she went in there and she seen her husband being massaged by another man. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that when Obama made it legal for the homosexual marriage stuff, the pedophiles was up next. They wanted their turn right after because homosexuality and pedophilia are cousins. That's why pederasty and homosexuality cannot be separated. And this is why, you see this? right there. And this is why you see this right here on the left-hand side. Homosexuality and the aspect of pederasty and the aspect of being a pedophile are all in the same culture. They are not separated. When they had brothers and sisters, the homosexual and lesbian parade in New York, you find people that were 15, 16 years old, children, high school people up there with their quote unquote flags. 15 and 16. When I was 15 and 16 years old, elders used to tell me in wisdom, don't even be worried about trying to sit up there and get a wife yet. Get your studies on, get a good career, so when you get your wife, you can be settled. That's what I was taught. I was never taught anything such as you can just be you and do you. Isn't that what older brothers and sisters tell their younger siblings? It seems generation after generation. Don't make the mistake I made. Continue in school. Do what you got to do. That's what older women and older men tell younger men and younger women. You're young. Get your career started now. Get your career started now while you're in your 20s. Think about this when you're 17 and 18. But with pederasty, they want you to think about being with the same gender. That's a problem. So if you're taking what Tacitus is saying, brothers and sisters, he also being familiar with Greek culture. And he's saying that Moses gave them a new form of worship opposed to all that is practiced by other men. Part of the laws of Moses is speaking against homosexual acts, and those who do it are to be put to death. Not just have your rights taken away, it's talking about taking your life away. Next slide. Moses on the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter 4. Behold, I have taught you, Israel, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that you may do so in the land whither thou goest in to possess it. Statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me. So the Torah doesn't leave one wondering, where did the laws of the Torah come from? Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great that has Elohim so nigh unto them, as Yah Elohim, who the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? So it didn't come from Hammurabi. It didn't come from out of Ma'at. It didn't come from out of no aspect of Alexandrian Jews copying Greek culture. It didn't come out of Persia. It tells you where it came from. If you don't respect the Torah, that's your problem. But one thing people should not do is lie on what they do not respect. I don't respect the Greek culture, but I'm not lying on them either. Next slide. Alexandria and Hadrian. Alexander of Greece and Hadrian of Rome. Alexander and Hephaestion were homosexuals. Plato stated homosexuality is regarded as shameful by barbarians and by those who live under despotic governments. You know, despotic means like a tyrant, all right? Because of its apparently not in the interest of such rulers to have great ideas engendered in their subjects, or powerful friendships, or passionate love, or which homosexuality is particularly apt to produce. The Church and the Homosexual by John Boswell. So you may want to look up that book where Plato was stated as saying that homosexuality is regarded as shameful by barbarians. The Greeks would have referred to as the Hebrew culture as barbarians. All right. Hadrian and Antonius were homosexuals. Potetius, a Roman poet, stated, may my enemies fall in love with women and my friends with boys. That's cited from Homosexuality in Ancient Rome by Paul Vine. Next slide. On the down low. Wow. J.L. King, in his book On the Down Low, speaks of the aspect that men who are into homosexual acts yet outwardly speak on loving and marrying women. they would deny they are gay. To them, says J. King, they are not gay or bisexual. They simply like having sex with men. Let us examine Leviticus chapter 18:22 in detail. There shall not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination. The highlighted part of there in the yellow, mishkabe. The word shakal means to lie. Mishkabe means the lanes of. Lanes of, in layman terms, positions. So whether one is into, quote, riding, scissors, quote unquote, doggy style, whatever position a man and a woman do, a man and a man, a male and a male is not supposed to do what a man and a woman do. Brothers and sisters, it's grotesque. So I wanted to show the aspect of why the scriptures, namely the Old Testament, is not in cahoots with the Greek culture like some try to portray. And these memes that's being presented is straight garbage. All right? What's the date in the Bible? Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the Bible, like many other ancient documents, deals with what you call a regnal dating. And it came to pass in the days of such and such. And it came to pass in the days of such and such. That's a date. They use regnal dating, R-E-G-N-A-L. That's part of a calendar and counting. So it's not hard to figure that part out. Next slide. The book's available. Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. Available on Amazon, as well as the book on the right-hand side. Hebrew is easy. This is a new book that came out this month. Giving honor and praise to the creator for such. Hebrew Basics from Aleph to Shamar, Volume 1. Now I want to emphasize on something. The book that you see on the right-hand side, Hebrew is Easy, is available not on Amazon yet. It's only available now on a thing called lulu.com, Lulu.com. So you will have to go to Lulu, Lulu, Lulu.com, then go to the bookstore because I'm dealing with a different set of publishers than I had with CreateSpace. All right. The book, however, that is available on Amazon is called Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. All right. Giving honor and praise to the Most High, creator, maker of heaven and earth. His scriptures, namely the Old Testament, is not from another culture. The Greeks talked about it. The Hebrews talked about it. The Romans talked about it. The Apocrypha talks about the aspect, brothers and sisters, of the Greeks coming in and wickedness coming into fruition. And we already shown what the Greeks was about. Their god, one of their gods, Zeus, is shown with the homosexual act. So if their god is shown as such, you know the people are into it. Shalom.